This building, this Martello Tower in the corner, that's in Canada, but off to the back you see Fort Niagara, which is a United States fort. This painting depicts a little known and largely forgotten part of Canada's First World War effort. These are members of the Polish Army. They're generally from the United States, so they would have either been recent immigrants or of Polish descent. And the Allies thought it'd be a good idea to form a Polish legion to send overseas to fight on the Western Front. France in 1917 said that they would help fund this army and that they would then go fight with French troops overseas. Canada's part was assembling them and giving them basic training, which they did at Camp Niagara, which is at Niagara-on-the-Lake, Ontario.
And they were eager to fight because for 125 years there hadn't been a Poland. And now here was an opportunity for them to have a say in what happened over there, an actual action that might result in Poland being resurged basically in part of Europe.
This painting here was painted by C.W. Jeffreys, who was a Canadian artist. During this First World War, he was appointed a war artist by the Canadian War Memorials Fund, which was part of a broader effort to document and record Canada's war effort. So he was sent to various training facilities in Ontario to sketch and observe training activities there. And this is one of them. And what you're seeing here is some of the troops bathing. They've just been doing training in the hot sun, and their officers have marched them down to Lake Ontario to have a wash. And you can see that some of the men are holding soap. Some of the men are actually washing.
The interesting thing about that picture, of course, is you'll see all the non-coms, the non-commissioned officers along the bridge of the brow of that edge, making sure that they weren't going to offend anyone with the lack of modesty shown by the bathers.
There's a long tradition of nudity in art. The form is considered acceptable to depict. I'm not entirely sure why Jeffreys chose to depict this scene. He may have observed it and thought it would make a nice composition. But it certainly evokes something. I mean, these are all healthy, strong young men. This is a peaceful scene. They're on the shores of Lake Ontario. And you think about what they're about to do, where they're being sent into industrialized, brutal warfare, designed to tear these very bodies apart. So it makes for an interesting and poignant painting.
22,000 Polish soldiers were trained here in Niagara, which is a rather large amount of manpower. And where I'm standing right now is actually a very important element of that whole story. Behind us is an area that's encased by a fence, as you can see, with silver eagles on the gate. That is actually part of Poland. Inside that little fenced area, the government of Canada has ceded this property to Poland, because buried inside there are 20 young men who in January of 1919, just after the war ends, they die of Spanish flu as it sweeps through the Polish encampment here. And every year, large numbers of Polish visitors come to pay homage to those young men who gave up their lives in a real sense for the purpose of Poland being reborn once again.
It reminds you that this really was a world war. This was a multinational scheme, and these are Polish men being trained by Canadians. You can see the United States off in the background. They're going overseas to fight with France. So it does remind you that the World War really was a global conflict, and it brought different nations together and also tore them apart.
There's a young lady who tended to these soldiers, as well as other ones that were suffering this terrible, terrible plague-like situation with the Spanish flu, and she is buried just across the street in St. Mark's Cemetery, and is also honored by Polish visitors who come here because of her diligence and her dedication and the love she showed to these young men before they passed on.